Hi, I'm Dr. Samantha Wellspring, the owner of Wild Fed, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about soaking the pellets of our horse feed that we make. And this is probably a big bone of contention and a reason why some people perhaps aren't able to do the pellets, because in the barn they're in, maybe they don't, there's not someone there who can soak them, or they don't have the access to water, stuff like that. And I just want to explain a little bit more about it. So there's nothing really different about our pellets compared to a hay pellet. So I'm really just talking about the argument in general of why you would soak any kind of pellet or dehydrated hay product. So the way that our feed is made is that the hay comes from bales and it's put through a die, which is basically a huge piece of metal with little holes cut out in it the size of the pellet. And there's a grinder on top, or kind of this device on top, that grinds the hay down and pushes it down through the die. So there's an immense amount of pressure that's created to kind of squeeze it through this small space. It's already been cut up to 1/4 inch, the hay at that point, but it does require a lot of pressure to put it through this really small hole. And in that process, that pressure creates heat. And so the heat makes it so the pellet is kind of letting off basically steam, essentially. Any moisture that was in the hay is going to be sort of evaporated off, likely. Obviously there's some moisture content, but it's drier than even hay. So when a horse eats it, they make a ton of stomach acid, and they have a lot of juices in their stomach. So it's like gallons. So it's not critical, but if you give them a dry hay product, especially if you're giving them in big quantities, the water is just going to be attracted to it, and it's going to soak up into that pellet. And so essentially you're taking hydration from your horse that your horse already had to rehydrate this pellet, and kind of leaving them slightly more dehydrated than they would have been prior. And in most horses, it's not a big deal, but there are the cases, certain horses that don't have really good saliva flow, or don't make maybe enough digestive juices. Usually the risk would be choking. So usually it would be a situation where it might happen a little bit higher up in the GI tract, so before it gets to the stomach, where they don't make enough saliva, so maybe it would kind of like stick in their throat, and that's when you get in trouble. So that's really what we're trying to avoid. As a company policy, we just say soak it. Are there people who don't soak it? Yes. Is that something we recommend? No. And it's few and far between, but there are cases where horses can choke on these pellets. So hopefully that's clarified. I like adding water, because then I know my horse is getting hydrated. I never had to worry about my horse drinking enough fluids. You can really, if the horse has really good teeth, you just really need to wet it down. It doesn't have to be totally puffed up, rehydrated. But if a horse doesn't have great teeth, or they're older, or they don't have a lot of saliva, you definitely want to make sure that it's soaked all the way through. So hopefully that helps and clarifies things for you, and I'll talk to you next time.